Awesome. Thank you, Zeph. Thank you, Dan and Lygia, for helping moderate the session. And thank you to everyone who's joining. The Warning Letter Wednesday. This is our webinar series we put on. And this month's topic is QMSR changes and what to expect. I'm happy. Oh, sorry, Dan, I wasn't sure. So I'm happy to introduce myself. I'm the CEO and founder of Global Key Solutions. We are focused on bringing life science companies regulatory data from a span of global regulatory agencies. It's a pleasure to have Dan Barreto here on the call with us, who will be speaking on these QMSR topics. He's the president and CEO of PharmQ Global with over 40 years of combined FDA and regulatory experience. I'm also happy to introduce Keypedia. A lot of our presentation was made using data pulled from Keypedia. We asked Keypedia to introduce itself, so this is how Keypedia introduced itself as an FDA regulatory assistant, able to help us find data from the FDA and other enforcement actions. So thank you for Keypedia for introducing itself. And with no further ado, we'll hand it off to Dan.
Thank you, George. I think
one more.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. One more quick slide on Keypedia. This is an example of how we were able to pull data for the presentation. So we asked it first, starting with like simple questions around QMSR, and then we dove deeper into some of the key changes and predicate rules related that it had mentioned.
Okay, well, thank you, George, for that introduction. When we were discussing what subject should we bring in February to discussion at the Warning Letter Wednesday seminar, we definitely decided that the most important topic to bring about was regarding QMSR. And it's because as of February the 2nd, the QMSR is in effect. And it's going to have an incredible impact on the ability of companies to maintain quality and compliance expectations from an FDA perspective. QMSR brings some significant changes to the industry. However, today, what I want to do is really to talk about some specific areas of concern to me and to GKS with respect to the challenges the industry will face. But the truth is that what this process wants to do, this regulation, is really to bring some harmonization between the FDA GMPs for medical devices and the expectations requirements that are set by ISO 13485, which is a standard that is used across the planet. So what it does is really that it brings alignment between US regulations and global standards. And this is good because now it makes it easier for manufacturers to market the products in multiple countries. And so that's a great thing. It also promotes the use of a risk-based approach to quality management, which is a topic that is also always a discussion of concern, at least for me, because the concept of risk-based approach, it's a concept that when it's brought to practice, especially during inspections, it can be a challenging situation. And then, of course, the last thing that it wants to do this is to reduce the need for duplicative quality systems. So from an objective perspective, when you look at this approach that FDA has taken, there are some positive things that come with this harmonization activity. Having said that, and during this discussion, we're going to bring some areas of concern. So we're going basically, there's a shift. So in the topic of today, we're going to talk a little bit about those areas that for the long time, we considered to be off limit to the FDA, and now they're fair game. And so that's what the new QMSR does. It's in the past, FDA did not routinely review certain records, especially those associated with management reviews and internal audits. And the reason for that was that FDA wanted to encourage, the industry to be self-critical in a very comfortable way, to do self-assessments without fear of, immediate regulatory citation, and not to make, a certain low-hanging fruit approach for inspectors. So the new QMSR actually does provide an exception to that historical position the FDA had with respect to these activities. And there's where we see some of the, let's say, the impact. And from the impact, we could see a potential danger in some respect. Sorry. So why is FDA making this change? Well, because I think that what the FDA wants to do from a compliance perspective is actually put more responsibility and accountability for companies to engage in self-regulation. And it's really to put a little bit more pressure for companies to actually focus on those areas where the companies are supposed to be more proactive, more corrective, and again, more focus on eliminating risks. So by reviewing the records that were previously not reviewed, what the FDA inspectors will do is that they will try to determine, for instance, if a company has an effective system for self-detection. And how does that happen? Well, they're going to be looking at your internal audits. They're going to look at the findings that those audits indicate, and to what extent those audits indicate if you have a system that actually gets to see systemic problems. The second thing is really to see, once those issues have been detected, the FDA wants to see, are you elevating those issues appropriately? In other words, are you actually classifying those issues in accordance to the level of significance and the seriousness associated with them? And are you able to communicate those issues, across the organization wherever it's necessary? And the third thing is, okay, now that you have identified the issues, that you have elevated the issue to the right functions, are you taking the right corrective and preventive actions? In other words, are you implementing corrective actions that eliminate the problem or reduce the issue? But is this being done in a way that is actually effective? In other words, that there's no repetition. And then once you identify those corrective actions, are you closing those corrective actions? Are you implementing the right procedures? Are you putting the right training? Are you changing or improving the right systems in place? So basically, from my perspective, as a summary, is the FDA is forcing the regulated industry to beef up its regulation activities. And that's a big change, because remember, especially in medical devices, there is a lot of emphasis placed on management responsibility. Now, now that we know that we've got these issues coming, how do I address the concern that I have with the potential impact of the QMSR implementation, and how do I prepare for it? So the first thing that I think it's important is you really need to look at the way in which you are conducting your audit program. And I always say that you really have to work first and foremost with your audit personnel. You need to convey to them that things have changed as of February the 2nd, and that the role of internal audits, it's going to have to take a higher relevance under the QMSR. You have to let them know And I'm talking about internal auditors at the site level, internal auditors at the global level, and then the auditors that you may bring from, external sources. So it's important that they really understand that there is a change in terms of the way in which audits have to be performed. The second one is you have to strengthen your audits. In other words, you really have to make sure that you can identify exactly what is your audit plan, what is it that you're focusing on, and is that audit going to achieve the objective of verifying first and foremost that whomever the auditee is uh, performing according to expectation, and if they're not, for you to describe what the problem is. The third thing is you really need to focus on the process. When I talk about the process is when you establish an internal audit program, is that process designed in such a way that you're able to put the right schedule, to put the right people to do the right audits, and that the audits are pre-planned in a way that you already know what is it that you're going to be auditing and why. And then once those audits have been conducted, if issues have been found, how is it that you linked your audit program to a CAPA activity? Because if findings are made, then you're going to need some corrective action. Um, so you really need to make sure that then finally you need to train your team for, them now to become subject matter experts. So I expect that during future inspections, internal auditors will be asked to come in and be part of the inspection process. In other words, they may have to explain the findings that they did and the work that they did. So think of it this way. So a well-documented internal audit defines issues, coupled with a management review process that addresses them, is going to be strong evidence of a healthy and functioning quality management system. So you might say, okay, why is the legal department brought into this discussion? Well, because your internal audit program activities, your internal audit reports, your CAPAs associated with those internal audits, your management review activity records, the ones that you generate, though all of those presentations and all of those meeting minutes, now they are going to be open and exposed to becoming reviewed. They are also going to be the subject of being copied and becoming part of an inspection report. So you will expect increased regulatory risk now that these activities, which were before not exposed, now they're going to be actively exposed. So even the way in which you're going to document your activities, whether it's during an inspection, during management review, and the conclusions that are made, those things are going to have to be really looked at in some cases by the legal department of the organization, especially if the documents generated by you indicate that you are exposed from a compliance perspective, but also from a liability perspective. So in the hands of an FDA inspector, these documents can provide a direct roadmap to a company's biggest compliance gap. So you really need to make sure that the legal counsel is able to, in a certain way, even help with defining how is it that those reports are going to be written in the future, especially when people put subjective conclusions or conclusions that are inaccurate or incorrect. So companies need to look in terms of that attorney-client privilege position. So they need to think about how do they explore conducting certain sensitive audits under the direction of the legal counsel, especially audits that, for instance, those that have to do with data integrity issues associated with regulatory submissions. Those audits are going to be reviewed, and you really need to make sure that you get your legal department involved. The narrative, managing the narrative. So the way you're going to write your audits is it's gonna have to change because in the past you had a lot of freedom, but now you really have to you really have to make sure that your narrative is factual, that it's not subjective, that your narrative is not accusative, that your narrative is not one that basically creates, incorrect admissions of guilt. So you really have to make sure that you're able to be as factual as you can be. So to me, the site and corporate legal departments would have to re-engineer their current role and will need to become more knowledgeable of the intricate operations within the sites. The scrutiny of the language, so make sure that the words that you use are the right words in terms of the work that you're going to be documenting. So why is there going to be heightened scrutiny? Well, because in the past, the point of entry for any inspections, and you all know this. I mean, you've seen this. Those of you who have been part of any inspections, it was simple. OOS investigations, non-conformance investigations, your CAPA program, obviously your complaint management program in change control, just to begin with, because if these things were okay, then that would give the FDA inspector the ability then to look at other areas with a certain level of less concern. But if these were not good, then the FDA inspector had to go to all the other areas, but they had no chance to look in the past at your internal audits or at your management review. So this is important. Now, look at as of February 26th, the first point of entry, if I were the FD inspector, and I expect the FD inspectors to do this, would be, I want to see the internal audits that you have performed over the last 2 years. I want to see the internal audit reports. I want to see your internal audit program. I want to see how many audits you performed. I want to see the findings of those internal audits. I want to see all the supplier audits that you've performed over the last 2 years. And what I'm talking about is not only looking at the process, but also at the performance. And by the way, I want to start looking at your management review. So I don't expect inspectors to go straight into OS investigations. First, they're going to look at your internal audits program first. And that really puts now a different approach. So as part of your inspection readiness program, now you have an important set of documents or activities that you're going to have to be looking at as part of the inspection readiness program. So key functions under pressure. So your site and global senior management, because remember, from a management review process, senior management is present. Senior management has the authority, responsibility, and the power to actually make things happen. So it's going to be very obvious to an FDA inspector the extent to which that management responsibility is executed. So are senior management supporting a strong management review process? Are they present? And if they're not, why not? And then who's making the decisions? Is senior management actually supporting the site goals and objectives from a quality and compliance perspective? I want to repeat myself. The site and global internal audit program, again, has to be re-engineered. And even for external consultants and auditors, their records are also going to be exposed. So they really need to make sure that they actually performed their work correctly, and whatever recommendations they make, that those recommendations are also done correctly, which means that the quality assurance organization has to review these external consultants' records with a lot of attention. Keep in mind, just because somebody comes from an external consultant source, that doesn't mean that they really understand. So they really have to be aligned with company policies and procedures. Quality assurance organization, now you're going to have to really, in addition to all of the work that you're continually reviewing, now you have to pay attention closer attention to all of these activities. And then I mentioned before, local and global legal organization. And with that, I want to say your local and global training program. There's going to be a lot of training that has to be implemented to actually make sure that you fulfill QMSR expectations for these activities that were off the chart before. So obviously there's a share program coordination and oversight across functions. So all of these different organizations that I mentioned before, now they have to find a way to actually engage in collaboration. I can see instances where, the internal audit organization may have to have a meeting with the legal department and the quality assurance organization to have a discussion on the findings of a specific internal audit and say, look, this audit, this report is going to be reviewed, scrutinized by an FD inspector. How do we prepare for this? And don't get me wrong, I'm not proposing that we implement inaccurate reports or reports that are not reflective of the issue. But the legal department and the quality assurance unit should be in a position to be able to be aligned with what you're presenting. So where is it that the legal department could be involved? Well, they're going to be looking at, are you failing to implement a true risk-based program and schedule? And do we understand what that means? That legal department, from my perspective, may need to have a little bit of better knowledge of regulations and internal procedures. And they're going to also try to verify if we are lacking that knowledge. They're going to be looking at content discrepancies and lack of accuracy. They're going to really focus on objectivity of written statements, admissions of fault. And here, if people are making references to inaccurate evidence, did you look at the right documentation, right? And if from a management review perspective and a management responsibility, did you escalate your issue when you are supposed to do? Did you do it correctly? Did you do a timely report submission? Oh, yeah, I finished my audit last month and I still don't have this report and we have serious issues. FT is going to be looking at that and you're going to get a 483 for that. And then you're going to have to really get your legal department involved to protect you in a certain way and to help you to draw an approach. And then, of course, failure to reach the right conclusions, because it doesn't matter if you did the audit if you did not really reach the right conclusions in terms of what type of corrective actions you're going to implement. So from a pre-QMSR historical view of internal audits, and this is where I use Wikipedia, I try to see where is it that the FDA has really focused in the past with respect to some of these activities that they're going to be looking at much closer now. And one of some of the things that we found is the people have companies have been cited for insufficient documentation. In other words, audit findings and reports and conclusions were not adequately documented or maintained. And this was at a time when they didn't really have all full exposure and access to your documentation. Lack of management review. And what that means is that they were able to see if the management attendance was lacking. So and that's a problem when management is not providing inadequate scope and frequency. In other words, you have an audit process that really doesn't show exactly a thinking process from a systemic perspective. Typical failure to implement corrective actions. So that's a given. We've seen it historically. And then failure to focus on systemic issues. In other words, your audits show that your quality assurance program is inaccurate, but your corrective actions are not really targeted. Lack of auditor independence. Yeah, this is also one where you've got people auditing, and then the auditor is basically told you don't have to write this for us. Just put a report that basically makes it easy for us to get out. Don't get involved. And this has happened as well. And then, of course, inadequate procedures. So you can tell that there has already been a certain level of interest by the FDA on these activities. Imagine what the 483s of the future will look like once they have full access to your documentation. So what do you need to do? First, you need to integrate your quality management activities into the entire product life cycle. Your QMS cannot be an isolated function. It really has to be one that is integrated with the design and development controls and pre-market submission activities. Because even though we're not talking about that today, FDA is going to be paying more attention on these activities. So your design history files, FDA is going to look at them. So any disconnect between your pre-market submission and your operational QMS is going to be a significant red flag for the FDA. So this is really about now your quality management system activities. Number two, you need to understand the FDA's inspection process, right? So I'm interested, and I propose that you do the same. Take a look at the relevant sections of the IOM, Inspector Operations Manual, that will come out with respect to the way the inspectors will tackle and address a QMSR inspection. I have not seen it yet, but I expect that this is going to be a very important date. So from a documentation perspective, make sure you get a copy of that IOM section that talks about, how what's going to be the way in which the FT is going to do this inspection. And then, of course, the compliance program guidance manual, or A20, it's also going to be an important document for you to look. So you're going to have to retrain your front room and back room teams on these procedures, but you also have to train these individuals on how to better understand now the approach of the FDA with respect to these topics. Number three, you need to adopt a data-driven quality culture. So do not wait for the inspector to ask for data. Just monitor your quality metrics in a way that you can demonstrate the health and effectiveness of your quality management system. So it's not about gathering data, but it's also about analyzing the data. It's about concluding on the data, and that conclusion has to be about you in a very forceful way demonstrated, self-regulation. So being able to present this data, show that you are engaging in continuous improvement, that shows that your QMS's activities are basically an effective system, not just a set of documents. Number four, maintain a robust and demonstrable compliance with core principles. In other words, these key areas that have to do with management responsibility and review, this has to be reinforced, because I expect the FDA to get a little bit more persistent and insistent on making sure that they can understand the extent to which that management responsibility for quality and compliance is being implemented. And then you need to master the concept of risk management. And now it's part of the process. It's a key emphasis on ISO. So you're going to use it, but make sure that you're able to master it. And obviously, your corrective and preventive action program, that's going to be your savior, because if you identify the right problems and then you identify the right solutions and then you implement them, that's exactly what's going to allow you to show control over the inspection. And then, of course, these key areas of design control, supplier management, this is amazingly important. I can see FDA placing more attention into this. So the importance of quality metrics, they are indicators. They should be indicators of focus, intent of self-regulation, self-oversight, and self-management. And keep in mind now your quality metrics, which are part of your management review activities, are going to be transparent to internal and external sources. So those quality metrics, first, they have to be the right ones. Second, you're going to have to measure and monitor them, and then you're going to have to show that the quality metrics are actually indicating that your system is under control. So your quality metrics will also be a source of action for system improvement and correction. So it's not just about analyzing data, but it's also about creating action. Those your quality metrics are achievable based on resource and funding allocation. And then, of course, they're manageable because they supplement your daily operations and they're not engaging in any sort of competition or conflict or discrepancy. Um, your management review process is going to be the place where your quality metrics will be evaluated. So you really have to make sure that your management review process is mature, it's working. And then obviously it's they justify ensuring that you have a system-based quality and that engages in strong compliance and patient safety. So here are some helpful links for you to become familiarized with the process. And so keep this as an important source of you, but also remember I talked a little bit about the inspector operations manual and then the compliance program guidance manual. And of course, Wikipedia is an extremely strong source of support. I just want to read, you know, something from Wikipedia that I extracted recently. So ISO 1345 is fundamentally a standard that specifies requirements for a QMS where an organization needs to demonstrate its ability to provide medical devices and related services that consistently meet customer and crucially applicable regulatory expectations. Quality is the foundation. So the ISO 1345 and compliance is the outcome. So Wikipedia is able to really help you to actually put together also besides the IOM, Advanced Programs and Guidance Manual, and this link that we just give you, you have to think of Wikipedia as that source of support. So key takeaways, and with this I finish. All of these activities are going to be integrated into a successful program. Your quality assurance program is at the top, but you're going to have to make sure that you've got a strong internal audit program parallel to a strong management review process, which is going to be supported by a strong process improvement program, external audit program, and then of course a CAPA activities. If you can demonstrate this proactive, data-driven, integrative approach, you will be well positioned to successful inspection outcomes. George?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. These are super. And it really does give a good summary and rundown view of some of the changes coming up. Uh, Thank you again also for mentioning sort of how Keypedia slots into all of this. I think with a widened breadth and scope, Dan, would you say that it'll be more critical for us to sort of use tools to help with some of these things?
I think it's extremely important to do that because the tools, one of the things that they do is first you get precise information. And that it comes from the source, which is the FDA and then the global regulators. Number two, the tool is able to give you answers to any questions that you may have within seconds. When before, when you had consultants like myself, I had to go to the document, I had to do my research, I had to put together a position paper. And Wikipedia, for instance, does that within seconds. You ask the question, you get the answer. And of course, like any other, virtual support, you still can use the experience of people like myself to come to conclusions, which by the way, this presentation it's really a supplement between my experience and the sourcing that I got from Wikipedia. And I tell you, it makes a significant difference for anybody like myself to quickly identify exactly what's going to be the impact of a regulation like QMSR. And on this, I focused on these key areas that were of concern. But if I wanted to focus on all the areas, Wikipedia is going to help me to do that.
That makes sense, Dan. Yeah. And I think just to sort of reiterate, I mean, it certainly sounds like Wikipedia fits into filling this gap with widened breadth. I think we certainly can see where this is helpful. The example I wanted to pull and show was around the top citations for 21 CFR 820. So this is a bit of a understanding past precedent example. So we used Wikipedia and the dashboard to first understand sort of what were the top CFR codes in time, and then comparing them to some of the upcoming and widened breadth of QSMR changes. Because I think, Dan, what's interesting and what Wikipedia sort of noted, and what's interesting to note is that, many of the new areas that are opened up for scrutiny are already top trending predicate rules and top trending observations. And that's what this next slide really shows. But I would just want to note that sort of as we see in craft searches and look for both the new changes and what those changes are, and then how those changes have been cited in the past, which the answer is pretty much frequently, especially in past years coming out of COVID. We've seen increase in pretty much across the board for device citations. We're finally seeing we're getting to what was the peak in 2014, 2015 with device citations, but we're not quite there yet numerically. But yeah, I was happy to sort of use Wikipedia for this specific use case and wanted to show everybody exactly how it helped put together this presentation. So thank you.